fake news network. The only news network that doesn't go blind from looking at a spray tan. I'm Wolf Whistler.
And I'm Han Shannity. If you're tuning into this broadcast, that's amazing, because we only air during school hours, late at night, or at 2 in the morning.
Thanks, Han. To reiterate, we are fake news. There's nothing real about this, except all of our content. And us. We're real too.
Yes, we are, both. Today we're going to be covering mass culture in the 1920s, meaning radio, Hollywood, and sports.
Hey, Han, why is the news network in 2018 covering such a specific topic from the 1920s?
I don't know. Mr. Rosen works in mysterious ways, though. You can read all about it in the Holy Bible.
That sounds like a pretty boring read, Han. Luckily, I'll have time to read 1/100th of it during this commercial break.
Do you want a radio from the 1920s in the 1920s?
No, not really, man.
Doesn't matter. For the low, low price of $75, you can have your very own radio.
I don't really want, like, a radio.
Why wouldn't you want a radio in the 1920s? They were all the rage. You can listen to sporting events, quiz shows, comedies, and more. The National Broadcasting Company appeared in 1924, and CBS appeared in 1927. People were lining up to purchase by the mid-1920s. So many radios were being sold that people stood in line to get vouchers of radios that weren't even in stock yet.
Listen, man, I don't want a freaking 1920s radio. After the historic broadcast made by KDKA that relayed the news that Warren Harding had beaten James Cox in the race for the White House, radio ownership grew steadily. And yes, the radio was a form of entertainment for families, but the radio was a chaotic landscape because the government refused to regulate radio wave usage until the end of the 1920s. Broadcasting companies waged war on each other to get radio waves, sometimes resulting in a station being cut off and replaced with another station in the middle of a broadcast.
But the radios in the 1920s had a profound effect on the masses. It helped combat provincialism by allowing people to get information from across the country. It helped sports explode in popularity by allowing people to listen to sporting events without attending them. And it provided a medium through which music could be grow by allowing artists to distribute their music to far more people at once than they could at a show.
Can you just leave me alone?
Watching this commercial with the same money, and information contract with the started lost radio episode. The social broadcast only not transmitted the side effects of radio, instead of radio, are disease, nausea, headache, migraines, deep syndrome, stimulating plague, disease, family of boils, contracting water plague, 15 in stress bile depression, meningioma, brain cancer, throat cancer, lung cancer, leukemia, liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, heart cancer, colon cancer, urine cancer, kidney cancer, appendicitis, cancer, digestive cancer, full shutdown, disease, except the fire to and slightly when you're meals.
Welcome back. We're here to talk with our movie correspondent, Canderson Hooper. How are you, Canderson?
Well, I'm super duper.
That's good. What would you say was the importance of cinema in the 1920s?
Well, to quote the journalist Lloyd Lewis, in the deluxe house, every man is a king and every woman is a queen. Most of these cinema palaces sell all their seats at the same price. And get it, the rich man stands in the line with the poor in this suave atmosphere. The differences that determine our lives outside are forgotten. All men enter these portals equal, and thus the movies are perhaps a symbol of democracy. End quote. These so-called cinema palaces had grand movie theaters that had space for a full orchestra to accompany the film, because movies didn't have any sound until 1927. With the first non-silent movie, or talkie, The Jazz Singer, the importance of movies was that they brought entertainment like never before, and they allowed people to experience long stories, comedy, drama, and tragedy without going to a play.
For our last question, what were some of the most influential movies or actors in the 1920s?
Two actors at the time were Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. The two ended up divorcing both their spouses to get married. Douglas Fairbanks starred in many influential pictures at the time, such as The Three Musketeers in 1921 and Robin Hood in 1922. He also was the host of the first ever Oscars. Mary Pickford was also influential. She signed a deal with Paramount Pictures in 1919 that gave her full creative control over movies that she started and unprecedented salaries for an actress of $10,000. Her movie Pollyanna in 1920 and Rosita in 1923 both grossed over $1 million. Charlie Chaplin was an icon. His career spanned over 70 years, but his claim to fame were the silent comedies in 1920s. After forming his own production company in 1918, he began creating silent films. His notable pictures in 1920 were The Kid in 1920, which was the first movie to combine comedy and drama. The Gold Rush, which grossed over $5 million in 1924 and was one of the most popular movies of the decade. And The Circus in 1927, that won the first ever Academy Award.
Thank you so much for your insight on this topic, Canderson.
My pleasure.
And now, for the last segment of our day, we turn to sports in the 1920s. Both? Apparently both is MIA, so we need to bring our sports correspondent, Mr. Zareed Fakaria, in. How are you doing, Mr. Fakaria?
I'm great, thanks.
You look a lot like Canderson Hooper.
Family resemblance.
I heard you're here to give us the rundown on sports.
That's right, Han. I'm here to give you the rundown on sports and sports in the 1920s.
Great. That sounds positively boring.
Sports exploded in popularity in the 1920s. With the advent of the radio, people didn't have to go to games to experience them. And the automobile made it easier to get a long distance away to attend a stadium if someone wanted. Newspapers, magazines, and movies all added to this to increase popularity as well. The mediums glorified sports players, gave interviews with the teams or synopses of the game, and advertised opportunities to go to sporting events. On top of this, the higher standing of living for many people gave people more time. Some chose to use this time to participate in local or sometimes corporate baseball teams or golf teams. The new economy also saw the construction of lavish stadiums and more money being put into sports teams. The most popular sports of the 1920s were boxing, baseball, basketball, football, but other sports also were attractive, such as ice hockey, tennis, golf, and swimming.
Interesting, Mr. Ficaria. I heard you prepared a synopsis on the various sports prevalent in the 1920s, complete with demonstrations.
Yes, I have. Although baseball was coined the national pastime, football played a large role in the sports landscape of the 1920s as well. The 1920s saw college football dominate its professional counterpart. Red Grange was one of the most famous athletes of the 1920s and one of the greatest individual performances in college football history. The University of Illinois halfback ran for 402 yards, scored 5 touchdowns, and passed for another win as Illinois beat Michigan 39-14. The next fall, Grange, who was later credited for saving the struggling NFL, got signed under the Chicago Bears. After his signing, the pros were drawing nearly as many fans as college stadiums.
Touchdown!
Arguably, the most important sport of the 1920s was baseball. Coined the national pastime, more people went to baseball games. Following baseball and played baseball for fun more than any other sport. Baseball wasn't solely a sport people had to watch. Many adults played baseball for corporate and community teams. However, children at this time did not have formal baseball organizations such as Little League. Instead, they organized games in vacant lots.
Not to interrupt you, Mr. Ficari, but we scheduled to meet with Wolf at the moment. He's meeting us from his home.
And the Ku Klux Klan were shoved out of Amsterdam for good when Abraham Lincoln came down and slayed the dragon where he stood. Oh, I didn't see you there. I was just reading my favorite passage from the Holy Bible. I just wanted to read you this brief quote on Babe Ruth by W.O. McGeehan. Then I must get back to reading about the noble escapades of the U.S. Congress. Quote, Babe Ruth, with his bat, pounded baseball back into popularity. He swings with utmost sincerity. When he hits the ball, it goes into wide open spaces. When he misses with vehement sincerity.
That ties into what I was saying as well. Babe Ruth was undoubtedly the greatest baseball player of the 1920s. The man also nicknamed the Bambino. Ruth finished first in the American League in home runs while leading the Yankees to 6 World Series. I would also like to analyze this cartoon. Babe Ruth's depiction in the cartoon shows how people looked up to him and saw him as larger-than-life character. Babe Ruth was known as much for his enormous appetite for food, booze, and women as he was his home runs. Fascinating! Boxing was another big sport in the 1920s, attracting almost as many people as baseball, and for a large portion of the 20s, Jack Dempsey was the poster boy or hero. After beating Jess Willard in 1919 for the World Heavyweight Championship, the Manasseh Mauler retained his title until losing to Gene Tooney in a 1926 bout in Chicago. 1 year later, Dempsey lost to Tooney again and retired from professional boxing at age 32 as one of the most famous athletes of the 1920s.
That will be all for our program, at whatever time it is now. I'm not quite sure. I've been here for days since my wife left me. We'll be back if this group runs out of project ideas again. I don't know.
And yes, remember that this is fake news, but we are not fake.
Tune in next time when we figure out how to make the Vietnam War a boring topic. Oh!